So the ultimatum game is actually a special case uh, of game theory. So we can see the above situation in this grid system, and as we can see, here is player 1 proposer, here is player 2 the responder. If the proposer chooses to offer $5 and then the responder accept this amount, then both parties would get $5. Would get 5. And then if the proposer chooses to give out $1 to the responder and keep $9 to himself, then this would be the amount, would be the payoff for each player. On the other hand, if the responder chooses to reject whatever amount that proposer get, both parties would get nothing. So then the Nash equilibrium, for example, if the responder chooses to accept, the proposer would definitely choose to keep $9 to himself. On the other case, if the responder chooses to reject, then the proposer, it doesn't matter, the proposer would prefer nothing. And if proposer is going to offer $5, then the responder's preferences is choose to accept whatever the amount of money that proposer offered. And then if the proposer offer $9, then the responder should still prefer to accept this amount of money because there's higher payoff than rejecting the plan. So therefore, as we can see, the Nash equilibrium actually lies in the cell. So this means whatever the proposer's plan, responder should always accept this amount of money because the responder is always better off to accept this amount of money than reject and get nothing.
After looking at the results from our experiment, we need to take into consideration some of the factors that may have affected our results. For instance, the size of the stake. In other words, just the amount of money in the current game. There's studies shown by Cameron and Slonman and Roth showing that the stake doesn't significantly affect the proposer's or responder's behavior. Although there's another study entitled Stakes Matter in Ultimatum Games, where they found that as the stake increases substantially, rejection rates actually approach zero. So imagine a situation where there's a 90 to 10 split with $10. Well, the allocator is going to get 9, the responder is going to get $1. If the responder rejects, both of them aren't going to really lose too much in this scenario. Monetary gain isn't that great. But imagine the stake being $1 million. Now, $100,000 for the responder sounds relatively generous, and as you can imagine, more and more responders are not going to want to reject this. So, as just stated, the rejection rates are going to start to approach zero as we have more and more tests run for the same case. Another thing to consider are the individual characteristics like age, socioeconomic status, and gender have been eliminated actually as important explanatory variables. There are more examples down below that we're going to take a look at, but let's just look at, here's one, for instance. There was a study done in a village where the responder was given initial wealth and no wealth at all. And the differences in the results actually didn't really change much of anything. There were a few cases where if the responder had zero initial wealth, actually rejected lower offers because they thought they would get more because they had nothing to begin with. And further about gender not being eliminated, some studies of American college students find that females and males make different offers. Studies have shown that women tend to make less risky decisions than men, but there was another study done, gender differences in ultimatum games, despite rather than due to risk attitudes, showed that the nature of men and women's difference in risk does not actually play into any part of how offers are made and accepted. So there's little evidence to suggest that gender has any effect on how the offers are actually made. One large thing, a very large idea to consider is the level of understanding of the ultimatum game. Now, on paper, the ultimatum game seems very simple. If you were to show this just by an example, just to a couple of people, most of them will probably be able to get the grasp of it very, very simply. It's a very intuitive idea. Now imagine those two very novice players going against each other. If player 2 receives any kind of positive gain they're probably going to accept it, mostly because of their lack of understanding of how the game could be played. So imagine two economics students who are studying the Ultimatum game. Now, the player two is aware of the power they have in the games. They may leverage that to make the allocator propose a more fair offer. So as you can see, the level of understanding of the game could potentially change how that was played. Now let's take a look at some of the explanations for why the results came out the way they did. For one, we definitely need to take a look at is fairness. Players have an innate concept of fairness, that the 20% rejection rate is a result of responders believing that proposers offering highly unequal splits are acting unfairly. Now, imagine a situation where the allocator was told the recipient could not reject, excuse me. So the offer was $20, the stake was $20, and the allocator had the option of choosing between an 18 and 2 split or an even split. A study showed that 76% of the allocators actually went for an even split rather than making the responder take the $2. Also, responders are actually more willing to sacrifice money in order to punish an allocator who made an unfair offer. So people just have this innate sense of fairness. They want to make sure that both players are getting some reasonable benefit from this. This actually brings us to the next thing about why would a responder would want to reject an offer lower than 50%. There are two reasons for this: punishment and self-control. Punishment was just briefly mentioned. The responder was sacrificed money in order to punish an allocator. By that we mean they just want to teach player one a lesson and potentially change player one's offers in the future, not only for them, but for other potential players with that same allocator. So rejection is just a form of punishment. Another possibility is the recipient actually gains some kind of psychological benefit, causing punishment towards the allocator. The other thing is self-control. By that we mean the responder has more self-control, so they do not want to cause punishment towards player one, despite being given an unfair offer. In the experiment, individual differences actually don't play an important role. Excuse me, uniqueness. It turns out that the uniqueness of people does not actually provide any significant variability to how the game turns out. Oh, excuse me. Another thing for how the results turned out the way they did is the way the people play the Ultimate game reflected the way they interacted. For example, in cultures where gift giving is important, proposers often made what were called hypergenerous offers, in which the proposers kept less than he offered the responder. So people play the group, depending on the group and what people live in, actually definitely changes the way people play. Let's now look at some more examples for group differences in terms of market integration, the importance of cooperation, economic activities. Explain a great deal of the group differences in Ultimatum game behavior. For instance, participants from a whaling culture in which people survive only through highly cooperative interaction and sharing had a high incidence of more equal splits, as did those in cultures where people commonly exchange products and labor in markets. Another example is Mongolian allocators tend to offer even splits because reputation is more important than monetary gains. So that's the biggest thing we need to pay attention to, that people are valuing different things because money isn't always going to be the be all end all. So in the cases maybe here in the United States where we're always going to be using examples for money, people are always going to be thinking about it in terms of monetary gain. But that really depends on the utility function of those players. So a player who's motivated purely by monetary consideration, the standard sub-game perfect equilibrium solution implies that the prosperer will receive almost all of the money all the time because everyone is just trying to get any kind of monetary gain. So $10, the 90 to 10 split, the responder is mostly going to accept the dollar because it's a monetary gain. Otherwise, they have utility functions that are influenced by social, psychological, and methodological factors. As we saw just briefly ago, that people would prefer to get nothing at all because they would like to punish their allocators for be treating unfairly, or not treated unfairly, but being given an unfair offer. Now let's look at some real-life applications to how ultimate game theory can really take place more than just a classroom. So imagine a monopolist setting a price for a good or service. Is the quality of the ultimatum by default similar to how an allocator sets the price for the offer? Now, the recipient can reject the positive offer, and a buyer can reject a set price. Generally speaking, consumers may be unwilling to participate in an exchange in which the other party gets too large a share of the surplus. Another situation, just imagine your day-to-day life that two siblings having an argument about what movie to watch. They're arguing, no, it's not getting anywhere. Parent gets fed up about this. They step in. It's either you choose to watch a movie together or you get to watch nothing at all. Now, the sibling who's going to nominate a vote right away is by default going to be the allocator in this situation. Now, they have control over it. And if the other sibling, the responder, decides to reject this movie, they get to watch nothing at all. So more instances than not, they're probably going to accept whatever movie is picked so they can at least do something. Another example can be seen in firms or in union negotiations. A firm offers the final contract and the union can either accept or reject it. This offer can be seen as a percentage of the profit offered to the union. If the union rejects such a situation, it may lead to a costly strike, which is represented by a zero payoff to each player, or negotiations for peace between two disputing countries. Imagine rejection could lead to more violence, hence neither of them giving much of anything, the payoff being zero. Violence is usually not the solution. Or accepting the peace negotiation is mostly going to net them some form of peace. So as you can see, there are real life applications that far exceed just the classroom.